The stories you're about to hear are real stories. These is a story of three families, three Christmases, three nightmares. These aren't legends. These aren't folklore. These are documented experiences shared by real people who lived through something impossible, something that shattered their understanding of reality during what should have been the most magical time of year. And now, I'm sharing them with you. Story 1. The Thing That Wore Red. This first account is a compilation. Over the past 2 decades, dozens of people have shared eerily similar experiences online. Different cities, different families, but always the same visitor. Let me tell you about the Morrison family. December 2007, Chicago suburbs. Real events. 12-year-old Danny Morrison couldn't sleep on Christmas Eve. Excitement? Maybe, but there was something else. An instinct. A primal warning his brain was trying to send him. Around 2:47 a.m., he heard it. Heavy footsteps. Not on the roof like the stories say. These were inside the house, in the hallway, coming from downstairs. Danny's room was on the second floor. His parents and little sister were asleep down the hall. But these footsteps, they were too heavy to be his father. Too deliberate to be someone half asleep walking to the bathroom. He should have stayed in bed. He should have pulled the covers over his head and pretended he heard nothing. But curiosity is a dangerous thing at midnight. Danny crept to his bedroom door. It opened just a crack, and looked down toward the living room where the Christmas tree lights cast flickering shadows. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. A figure stood in front of the fireplace. Tall, impossibly tall. At least 7 feet, maybe more. It wore a red suit, but not the bright, cheerful red you see in department stores. This was dark red, old red, the color of dried blood and shadows. The figure was crouched down, placing something under the tree. But its movements were wrong, too fluid, like watching a spider move, all wrong joints and unnatural angles. And then it stood up. Danny ducked back, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might wake his parents. But he had to look again, had to confirm what he'd seen. He peered around the doorframe one more time. The figure had turned around, and it was looking directly at him. The face. Danny would never forget that face. It was Santa's face, yes. White beard, rosy cheeks, but the eyes were completely black. Not like pupils, like someone had scooped out the eyes and filled the sockets with liquid darkness. And the smile was too wide. The mouth stretched impossibly across the face, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous, too wrong. The thing raised one finger to its lips. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. The sound that came out wasn't human. It was like wind through a cave, like static through dead air, like the sound reality makes when it tears. And then it began to dissolve. Not disappear, dissolve, like sugar in water. The edges of its body became translucent, then transparent, breaking apart into thousands of golden particles that floated in the air like dust in sunlight. Within seconds, it was gone. Danny stood frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then he ran, sprinted down the hall to his parents' room, burst through the door, and tried to tell them what he'd seen. His father grabbed a baseball bat and checked the house. Every door was locked. Every window is secure. No footprints in the snow outside. The alarm system showed no entries or exits. But when they went to the living room, they found something that made Danny's mother gasp. Wet footprints, large ones, leading from the fireplace to the Christmas tree. Not water, the footprints were still there, soaking into the carpet. They smelled like old earth, like grave dirt, like something that had been buried and decided to dig its way back up. And scattered across the carpet, glittering in the tree lights, were thousands of tiny golden flakes. They found them for weeks afterward, in corners, between floorboards, in their hair, their clothes, their food. The lab they sent samples to said it was mica, gold-colored mica, common minerals, nothing unusual, except mica doesn't appear out of thin air, and mica doesn't leave a smell like rotting flowers. Danny Morrison is 29 years old now. He shared his story anonymously on Reddit 5 years ago. Hundreds of people responded. And here's what terrified him. At least 40 people described seeing the exact same thing. Same impossibly tall figure. Same dark red suit. Same black eyes. Same dissolving into golden dust. Different cities. Different years. All on Christmas Eve. All between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. One person from Seattle. One from Boston. One from rural Texas. One from London. One from Sydney, Australia. They can't all be lying. They can't all have the same delusion. And they can't all have seen the same mall Santa, because mall Santas don't dissolve into golden particles and leave footprints that smell like graves. So what did they see? What visits homes on Christmas Eve when everyone is supposed to be sleeping? And why does it smile like that? Story 2. The Bridgeton Vanishing. December 24th, 2013, 6:47 p.m. The Wallace family was hosting their annual Christmas Eve dinner. Extended family, 23 people total. Laughter, music, the smell of ham and cookies. 16-year-old Marcus Wallace and his 13-year-old cousin Rebecca decided to play hide and seek with the younger kids. Old house, lots of hiding places, perfect game for a cold winter night. Marcus volunteered to be it. He stood in the front hallway, covered his eyes, and began counting to 50. 1, 2, 3. The other kids scattered throughout the house, giggling and whispering, finding their spots. 48, 49, 50. Ready or not, here I come. Marcus found most of them within 15 minutes. Behind the couch, in the pantry, under beds. The younger kids weren't particularly clever at hiding, but Rebecca wasn't with them. At first, Marcus thought she was just really good at the game. He searched for another 30 minutes, then an hour. Then he started getting worried and told the adults. That's when the real search began. 23 people, checking every room, every closet, every possible space a person could squeeze into, calling her name, getting increasingly frantic. The house wasn't that big. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, basement, attic, maybe 2,000 square feet total. You couldn't hide a teenager for 2 hours without being found. But Rebecca had vanished. They called the police at 9:15 p.m. Officers arrived and conducted a professional search. Dogs, thermal cameras. They went through that house like it was a crime scene. Yet nothing. No signs of forced entry. All windows and doors locked from the inside. The house had been full of people the entire time. Someone would have seen her leave. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The basement door had a simple keyed lock. The key was in Mr. Wallace's pocket. It had been there all day. The basement was used for storage. Rarely opened. Definitely not a place the kids played. At 11:30 p.m., nearly 5 hours after Rebecca disappeared, one of the officers decided to check the basement one more time. He asked Mr. Wallace for the key. The door was still locked. The key turned smoothly. The officer opened the door and descended the wooden stairs, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. And at the bottom of the stairs, sitting on the concrete floor in the middle of the basement, was Rebecca. She was conscious, eyes open, staring straight ahead at nothing. Her clothes were dirty. Her hands were scraped and bleeding. Her lips were blue from cold. The basement was unheated, probably around 40 degrees. But she wasn't responding to anything. Not her name, not touch, nothing. The paramedics rushed her to the hospital. Physical examination showed she was dehydrated, hypothermic, and had dirt under her fingernails like she'd been clawing at something. But no serious injuries. The psychiatric evaluation was strange. Rebecca couldn't, or wouldn't, speak for 3 days. When she finally did, she could only say 2 things over and over. The room got smaller, and it smelled like Christmas trees rotting. Over the following weeks, therapists managed to extract fragments of what she remembered, and this is what they pieced together. Rebecca had hidden in the basement. She knew the door was locked, but she'd found it open when she went looking for a hiding spot. She thought maybe someone had unlocked it for the game. She went down the stairs. The basement was dark, but her phone's flashlight worked fine. She found a spot behind some old furniture and crouched down to hide. And then, time stopped making sense. She said it felt like hours passed. The basement got darker. Her phone's light started to dim even though the battery was full, and the space around her started to change. The walls began closing in. Not quickly, slowly, inch by inch. The basement was getting smaller, the ceiling lowering. She tried to go back to the stairs, but couldn't find them. Every direction she turned, there was just more darkness and the smell, that horrible smell of pine needles and rot, and something else she couldn't identify. She screamed, pounded on the walls, clawed at the concrete with her bare hands. But no one came. No one heard. And then, suddenly, she was sitting at the bottom of the stairs again, in the basement that was exactly the same size it had always been, with the door locked from the outside. The police investigated extensively. No drugs in her system. No signs of assault. No explanation for how she got into a locked basement or how she got out of wherever she actually was for those 5 hours. Mr. Wallace sold the house 3 months later. The new owners lasted 6 months before moving out. They never said why, but when reporters asked, the husband would only say, "The basement isn't right." The house has been vacant for years now. The basement door remains locked. But people in the neighborhood report sometimes hearing pounding coming from inside the house. Always on December 24th. Always around 6:47 p.m. Always from the basement. Rebecca is 24 now. She hasn't celebrated Christmas since 2013. And she refuses to enter any room that doesn't have multiple exits. Because she knows something the rest of us don't. She knows that sometimes, during Christmas, spaces exist that shouldn't. Places that overlap with our world just enough to trap you. Just enough to change you. And she knows that whatever was in that basement with her is still waiting there. Story 3. The Sodder Christmas. This final story is the darkest. It's also the most well-documented. On Christmas morning, 1945, something happened that law enforcement still can't explain. Robert and Marie Tanner had 10 children. On Christmas Eve 1945, 9 of them were home. The oldest was serving overseas in the military. It was a normal evening. Presents wrapped. Stockings hung. The younger children went to bed excited for Christmas morning. The older ones stayed up later, helping their mother clean up from dinner. Around 1 a.m., Marie woke to the smell of smoke. The house was on fire. Robert and Marie managed to get out with 4 of their children, but 5 were still inside. Upstairs. Trapped. Robert tried to go back in. Broke a window with his bare hands. Climbed halfway through before the heat drove him back. He ran to get a ladder. They kept one against the side of the house, but it was gone. Vanished. He tried to move his trucks to reach the second-story windows. Neither vehicle would start, even though both had been running fine hours earlier. Marie called the fire department. The call went through, but the fire trucks didn't arrive until 8 a.m., 7 hours later. By then, there was nothing but ashes and rubble. 5 children. Maurice, 14. Martha, 12. Louis, 9. Jenny, 8. And Betty, 5 years old. All gone. Or so everyone thought. Here's where this stops being a tragedy and becomes something far stranger. The fire burned hot, too hot for a normal house fire. The flames were described as white and blue by neighbors. The house was reduced to ash in about 45 minutes. Complete cremation. But when investigators sifted through the remains, they found no human bones. None. Not fragments. Not teeth. Not ash residue. Nothing. A house fire, even a very hot one, does not completely vaporize 5 human bodies. Bones survive crematoriums set to 2,000 degrees. This was just a house fire. So where were the bodies? The official explanation was that the fire was just that intense. That somehow, impossibly, 5 children were reduced to literal nothing. But Robert Tanner didn't believe it. He knew his children weren't in that house when it burned. And then the sighting started. 3 weeks after the fire, a woman in the next town over approached Marie Tanner at church. The woman was pale, shaking. She said she'd seen Jenny, 8-year-old Jenny, at a rest stop about 50 miles away. The child was with a group of adults. She looked scared. When the woman approached, the adults hurried Jenny into a car and drove away. 2 months later, a man told Robert he'd seen Maurice working at a diner in Charleston, West Virginia. The boy looked at him, recognized him, started to speak. Then an older man grabbed Maurice's arm and pulled him into the back. Over the next 4 years, at least 15 people claimed to see one or more of the Tanner children, always with unfamiliar adults, always being led away before anyone could intervene. Then in 1949, Marie received a photograph in the mail. No return address, no note, just a photograph. It showed a young man, maybe 18 or 19 years old. Dark hair, strong resemblance to Louis, who would have been 13 by then. On the back, written in pencil, Louis Tanner. I love my brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. The photograph was taken professionally. Studio quality. The young man was wearing clothes that didn't look American. Investigators thought perhaps Italian or Mediterranean. Who sent it? Why? What did the cryptic message mean? Robert Tanner spent the rest of his life investigating. He put up a billboard with his children's faces, offering a reward for information. He received hundreds of tips. Most were cruel hoaxes, but some were disturbingly specific. Multiple people claimed the children were taken by an organized group, that the fire was set deliberately, that the missing ladder and disabled trucks were no accident, that this was a targeted abduction with the fire used as cover. But why? Why would anyone kidnap 5 children on Christmas Eve? What happened to them? Robert Tanner died in 1989 without answers. Marie died in 1990. The surviving children never stopped searching for their siblings. And here's the truly horrifying part that most people don't know. In the weeks leading up to the fire, strange things had been happening at the Tanner house. Marie reported a man coming to their door asking questions about their children, what grades they were in, what they looked like. Robert chased him off. The younger children said they'd seen someone watching them from the woods behind the house, a tall man in dark clothes who would disappear when they looked directly at him. On December 23rd, the day before the fire, someone cut the phone line. It was repaired, but the repairman told Robert something strange. The line wasn't damaged by weather. Someone cut it deliberately. Clean cut. 5 children vanished on Christmas Eve, 1945. The fire that was supposed to have killed them produced no bodies. Multiple witnesses placed them alive in various locations for years afterward. A mysterious photograph arrived with cryptic messages. Were they kidnapped? Sold? Taken by some organization for purposes we can't imagine? Or did something else happen that night? Something that can't be explained by human trafficking or criminal conspiracy. Because here's the final, most disturbing detail. In 2013, a woman in her 70s contacted the remaining Tanner family members. She claimed to be Betty Tanner. She had documents, childhood memories, specific knowledge only Betty would have. DNA testing proved she was not Betty Tanner, not even related to the family, but she believed she was. She passed a polygraph. She had memories of the fire, of being taken, of being raised by other people under a different name. Memories that match details never made public. How do you have someone else's memories? How do you believe you're someone you're not with such conviction that you pass a lie detector? What happened on Christmas Eve, 1945? Who or what took those children? And most disturbing of all, are they still out there? Still alive? Still thinking there's someone else? Still searching for a home they can't quite remember? 3 stories, 3 families, 3 Christmases that became nightmares. The thing in the red suit that visits homes when everyone should be sleeping. The basement that exists between spaces, trapping those who enter. The 5 children who vanished in flames that left no trace. So tonight, when you're safe in your home with your family, when you're hanging stockings and wrapping presents and singing carols, remember, Christmas isn't just about magic and miracles. It's also about the things that move in darkness during the longest nights of the year. The things that wear familiar shapes but have eyes full of nothing. The spaces between spaces that sometimes open are just wide enough to swallow you. The mysteries that even 70 years of investigation can't solve. If you have your own Christmas horror story, something real that happened to you or someone you know, share it, document it, add it to the archive. Because the more we collect, the more patterns we see. And maybe, just maybe, we'll finally understand what's really happening on Christmas Eve when the world is supposed to be silent and holy. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas, and keep your lights on.